I yelled it out at the top of my lungs back to my sister from the backyard. Mommy went to a welfare appointment. And I just remember my sister being so upset. Like she was mad at me.
It's time for the Margin Matters Minute with Money Man Jason Brown.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today. I have a very special guest that I'm so excited to share with you guys. Today we have Miss Yanely Espinal, who is the Director of Educational Outreach for Next Generation Personal Finance. She is also the host and creator of a very popular personal finance YouTube channel called Miss Be Helpful. But today we're talking with her because she is a new author of the new book, Mind Your Money, Insightful Stories and Strategies to Help You Reach Your #money goals. Yanely, thanks so much for joining me today to share more about your new book.
Thank you, Jason. This is amazing. I'm so excited to chat today.
Oh, now before we get into the questions that I had for you, I want to share with everybody my very favorite part of the entire book, and you will probably not guess this. On the cover, you have this little branded, it says certified true. I was looking at that. I was like, oh, this is 100%. It's been fact checked by all the fact checkers. This is 100% authentic. So everybody can be rest assured that everything in here is 100% true. I love that.
I love that you caught that detail. I got to give props to the book designer, Erin Tyler. She did the cover design and she was like, we had a long conversation about what the vibe I was going for. And she came back with this design that was perfect. I mean, spot on. I was like, the first try, she nailed it and crushed the cover. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Really cool. They did a nice job for it for sure. Now, let's dive into some of the questions I had for you, just regarding the book. So what, we're both money nerds. Between the two of us, we've probably read hundreds of money books, right?
Oh, yes.
So what inspired you to write your own book, and what makes your book unique? What makes your
Yeah.
book kind of different than the others?
Yeah, well, I think that the first thing is when I opened up my very first personal finance book back in 2013, 14, it was Women and Money by Susie Orman. And that empowered me so much as a woman to see her tell stories about how things are different for you when you identify as a woman and you have to deal with money, not only for yourself, but, for your children, your family, insecurity, so many things in a very different way. I think in the relationship that you have with money is very different from a lot of the men in your life, your father, your brothers, uncles, even siblings, brothers. So I felt that because I come from a very big family and there's 4 brothers, 5 sisters. So I'm one of 9. And I saw the breakdown, how different things are for the sisters in my family versus the brothers, how we're treated very differently. The expectations are different. And I come from a very traditional Dominican household. So very, immigrant community. My parents have very much a traditional mindset coming from the Caribbean. And so I think that kind of was transferred down to us. And, the sisters were constantly told, to think about finding the right kind of husband and getting married and thinking about, your children and all this. Mind you, my brothers were constantly pushed to think about like the career field that they wanted to do, learn about computers, how can you make money, right? And my dad and my mom, they were kind of talking to us differently about money. And I think Susie Orman pointed that out so well, which kind of trained my brain to just start thinking about money how I want to think about it, not how other people think I should think about money. But then ultimately, I read more and more and more books. First of all, most of them were written by men. So it was very rare that I started with a book written by a woman because it's not common. And
Mhm.
second of all the voices from the writers that I was reading, they didn't have my shared experiences, the stories of being an upbringing that is very much in the struggle, a low-income family, parents who never had a debit card, a credit card, a bank account. My household was cash only. And I felt like that story represents so many Americans, and yet it's not reflected in the personal narrative shared by any of the authors that I have been reading about. So I was like, okay, you know what? I think I got to put my voice out there and tell my story to help that resonate and land with so many readers who are going to identify with that struggle.
That's so great to hear, and I will say there's a lot of people that just don't trust banks,
That's
and like
true.
you said, like the cash, just 100% cash. A lot of my friends that work in the service industry, that's a perfect example because they get paid in cash, they deal in cash, they get tips or whatever, and none of them have bank accounts, so they
That's
they
right.
just for whatever reason, a variety of reasons, right? So that's very well said. So speaking of stories and stuff. I know your book is just loaded with personal stories. from your life and your experiences. So maybe tell me like a story, maybe from your childhood that,
Mm,
like a money story, that something that maybe happened to you that,
yeah.
that shaped you as an adult.
Yeah. I mean, you're holding a copy of the book, so you already know this. But for those who haven't read it, the opening scene is, one of my earliest memories. I have a very hard time remembering anything before that related to money. Maybe but like asking my parents for money for a field trip in kindergarten or something like that. But like, I wasn't involved, right, in the financial decision making. But it was a conversation that I had with my sister. And so I grew up in Bushwick in Brooklyn, which is very much low income, Caribbean, predominantly immigrant community. In the 90s and 2000s, it was pretty much that's the only people that were there. Of course, it's changed. It's very, hipster and artsy now. And even some of my friends that I went to college with are renting apartments in the neighborhood now, which is very interesting. But it wasn't like that when I was growing up. There was nobody but all of the immigrants and immigrant adjacent communities there. So Jamaicans, Haitians, Bayesian, Dominican, Puerto Rican, Mexican, this was the culture and the fabric of the community. And we were all pretty much on government assistance, welfare, food stamps. All of us went to the local public school and got free and reduced lunch. So Title I public schools, that was the vibe. That was the environment I grew up in. And it was just my normal. It was normalcy for me every day. But one day I went to the backyard and I was doing my chores, sweeping the backyard. And my sister came home and yelled out to me, like, where is mommy right now? Because she was looking for my mom. And I couldn't remember if she went to a doctor's appointment or if she had like where she was going. But as I was sweeping, I remembered that she said she was going to a welfare appointment. And that means that she had to go and sit in person with someone face to face and sort out her renewal of her application so she could continue to get food stamps and the government assistance that helped her buy groceries and, have a little petty cash for things. So I yelled it out at the top of my lungs back to my sister from the backyard. Mommy went to a welfare appointment. And I just remember my sister being so upset. Like she was mad at me. And she explained it to me like, you yelled out our business like that for the whole street, for everyone to hear you. You yelled it outside. So, like, what are you thinking? But, I was like 9 years old. I didn't understand what's the big deal. I couldn't process why are you so upset right now? Everybody on this block is also on welfare. So, what is the big deal? But it just goes to show that there's this culture of silencing us when it comes to talking about money, regardless of what the conversation topic is. If it's a question, if it's a statement, if it has to do with money, no, you do not talk about it openly or publicly. It's private, it's taboo, it's a point of shame and embarrassment and guilt sometimes. And so I was just taught really at a young age that money is not something that you should ever feel comfortable talking about openly.
Yeah, that's so true. And what's interesting about that whole story is that, like you said, it's taboo. Nobody talks about it, but everybody else was in the same situation, right?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
but they're trying to pretend like they're not,
Yeah,
I guess,
that's
right?
right.
Like,
That's right.
everyone's trying to like, pretend like, oh
Yeah.
no, that's not me, that's everybody
Right.
else kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and I think it psychologically and emotionally, you feel better about keeping on this front, keeping on this facade that like, maybe you're not in so deep in the struggle and maybe you're better off than some. And maybe that helps you feel a little better as you go through your daily life. But ultimately, it's not really the truth. And so I just didn't understand at 9, because you know how kids are. They're
Yeah,
like, they have no hair on their tongue. Like they just tell it like it is and they don't understand what's the big deal.
that's
So
right.
that was one of my earliest memories.
Yeah, no filter. Yeah, kids don't have filters.
They
That's true.
sure don't.
Yeah, that's a very and that's a very good, that's young, impressionable. That's
Yeah,
stuff that sticks with you.
that's right.
And like you said, you shared that story in the book as well, so people can, a lot of people can certainly relate to that. Now,
Yeah.
my next question, and this is one I love asking everybody. So, is what is the best and worst financial advice you've ever heard?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, worst for sure, I know. Which was I graduated college. I got my first job teaching,
Okay.
and I got an apartment with two of my friends. Who one of them was a teacher in my school, and the other one was a childhood friend, like from elementary school. We had been friends and remained friends through high school, through college. Even though we went to different schools, we always remained in touch. And so we moved in. We shared this apartment. And that friend had a little sister who couldn't go back to Penn State because they wouldn't clear her account with financial aid, right? She had to pay for the next semester and didn't have the money. She had already exhausted her federal student loan options. She had already taken on some private loans. She had already asked her family to co-sign loans for her. It was kind of at this point, she was desperate. And so I was talking to her sister, the family, and they asked me, hey, why don't, you co-sign a student loan for her because, it might actually help you have good credit. It might actually help you have some, more payments and stuff. And she's going to be the one to pay it anyway. Ultimately, this is her debt. So I thought to myself, you know what? I want to do a good thing. This girl is, from my community. It's very rare to find, young Latina women with a degree, especially if she was on a pre-med track like this. Come on, we have to support and uplift these young girls when they're on the right track. So I was like, let me, come through for my people. Let me go ahead and co-sign this loan. And I went onto the Sally Mae website. This was probably back in like 2013, 2012. I logged in, I filled out the information, and I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right because, I was filling out so many personal, like it was a lot. It was a long financial form, screen after screen after screen. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, am I doing the right thing here? But, I was being not necessarily coached, but like the environment, the situation was very much, I was in a situation where I felt like I had to kind of do this for them and I was trying to help. And so ultimately, co-signing that loan was so bad for my credit. She couldn't make her payments. I had to step in and make payments for several months, $350 every month I was paying. And by the time I signed the paperwork, it was a $13,000 loan amount that was approved. But by the time she finished school and they started charging me, it was $17,000 because of the extra interest that had accrued. So the worst mistake I've ever made and the worst advice I've ever gotten is that you should co-sign loans for someone to help you boost your credit score. Absolutely not. You do not need to do that. And honestly, I always tell people avoid it completely. Even if it's your children, don't co-sign a loan for them because that would essentially would be you taking on that debt yourself and being responsible for paying it back ultimately.
Now, I will tell you, I was reading that story in your book and I got sick to my stomach reading that
I
story.
know.
I started reading and I knew I was like, I'm yelling at the book, no, don't do it. Don't sign. Don't
I
sign.
know.
And
I know.
and I knew where it was going and I was like, I don't even have to read the rest of the story. I
I
know
needed you
exactly
in the
what's gonna
apartment with me
happen.
when I was 22 years old. I needed you yelling, don't do it
Don't do
then.
it. Don't sign. Don't abort. Abort. Yeah, run. 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 Yeah, I'm telling you,
Mm.
like, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but like it's a tremendous life learning experience.
Oh,
You're
yes,
using it to help others,
absolutely.
so you're turning it into good.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that's great. So what about any like words of wisdom? Like, have
Yeah,
you
best
received any
advice. Ooh,
best
okay.
advice?
Okay. I think it's tough because a lot of the financial advice that I've gotten didn't come until later in my life when I was kind of already like, yeah, I had already made a bunch of moves and knew a little bit more about money after reading so many books. But what I will say is the book that really changed my life in terms of like how serious I became about my finances was J.L. Collins' The Simple Path to Wealth. And it's not necessarily one word of advice, like one string of statement of advice. That whole book was just so like illuminating. I mean, it's written from the perspective of him as a father to his daughter, and he's hoping that one day he would just be able to hand her this manual that she needs to know everything about building wealth that he wish he knew. And so he wrote it in a book and said, why would I just keep this for my daughter when I can share it with the world? So I just love how he has that fatherly tone. But there's this one story in there, and as somebody who grew up, with not a lot of financial resources, it really stuck with me that there was it's like a little what do you call it, like a little fable sort of thing, right? Moral of the story type of thing, where these two old friends reunite and they meet each other, and one of them is a servant to the king and the other one is like, a lowly, kind of peasant kind of type of guy. And so they meet and like, wow, it's been so long, like, how are you doing? And then the guy who serves the king looks at his friend and goes, oh man, like, if you could just learn to serve the king, you wouldn't have to eat rice and beans every day. And so then the other guy turns to his friend and says, well, if you learned how to eat rice and beans every day and live on that, you wouldn't have to serve the king. And in that story, like, it just totally transformed my mindset about it's okay for me as a kind of person who cares about mission driven work to have an employer, to have a job. I know there's this hustle culture and entrepreneurship, be your own boss type of movement online, TikTok and Instagram. But the reality is the work that I want to do is very much mission oriented. And there's an organization just doing exactly that. So for me, it made sense to just plug into that and grind away at that goal. But then that doesn't mean that I just have to stop there, right? Like I don't necessarily have to serve the king forever and ever and ever. I can have all these other things that I do that I enjoy, that even if I live a simple life, I'm going to be really happy with the things that I'm doing, writing a book, creating content on YouTube and Instagram, having a community of supporters online. Like these types of things allow me to make passive income streams, and a lot of times on the side of my job, my full-time job. And so those lessons that kind of landed me from that book was that no matter what route you take, whether it's a 9 to 5, whether it's starting a business, whether it's investing in the stock market or investing in real estate, you need to have one of those things. And no matter what, you have to have this goal of investing constantly throughout your life, so that one day you can actually rest and enjoy the fruits of all your labor and hard work.
Awesome, man. And I do have that book. I haven't read it yet, but I have it. I
Oh,
have
you're
it
gonna
on
love
my
it.
shelf, and I'm going to read it soon.
You're gonna
Uh,
love it. You're gonna message me and say thank you for nudging
yes.
me to read it, because it's so good.
Yes, I can't wait to read it. Now, we're talking with Miss Yanely Espinal, the new author of the new book, Mind Your Money. Now, I want to spend the rest of the time of our interview today talking about, you just mentioned it, your work is your mission. And I
Yes,
know you're doing a big mission on getting financial education into the school system. So,
that's
my
right.
next question is, why don't the majority of schools in our country
Yeah.
teach personal finance? And before I let you talk, I have a quote directly from your book that I'm going to read to you. And it says, when someone has gone to school for almost 20 years, and this is you talking about yourself, so let everybody know this is you talking about yourself. When someone has gone to school for almost 20 years, but has yet to learn basic money management, there's something fishy going on. So I'm going to let you elaborate on that, and then share what you're doing with getting, money education in the school systems.
Yes. So that quote is so important, because it's when I started to feel a little bit like I was deprived of this type of education. I was always the kid who was really just like a rock star academically. Like I got A pluses on everything, 90s and above on everything. And I took pride in doing well academically, because my parents never went past the third grade in school. They never got a formal education, beyond third grade. Like they never went to middle school, high school, college. So for me to be first gen to graduate high school, and first gen to graduate college, and to get a master's degree, like all of these things, I didn't take that lightly. I really wanted to excel academically to make their struggles worth it. And so I did really well: math, science, social studies, any English language arts. Throw a class at me, I would do really well. But nobody ever threw a money class at me. And it just felt so weird. Like, how come I got a syllabus for every class? And I followed it to the T and got all the points in every class and did really well. But I never got a class about financial literacy with a syllabus that I would have learned to follow and do well there as well. I really feel like if I had that class, I would have done just as well as I did in all my other academic subjects. So I sort of just felt like, I've been deprived of this knowledge. And that was that section in the book saying, like, it's just fishy. You learn all these things, and what's the end goal? For you to eventually get a good job, be on a right career path for yourself, and make money so you can provide yourself and your family with security. But so if money is the end goal for you to take care of your family, community, and do good, why aren't we talking about it? It almost like, it literally is like a catch-22. Doesn't make sense. And so when I found out about NGPF was in 2018. I took the summer off after leaving a previous job in the private education sector. And I was in Barcelona for the summer, trying to decide what pathway did I want to follow for the rest of my life. Do I want to do YouTube full time? Do I want to, create an organization? Like, what do I want to do? Start a company? And at that point, I was invited to speak on a podcast for the NGPF teacher community. And so I didn't know what it was. I hadn't heard of them, but I said, sure, I'll jump on this podcast and talk about, my story and my YouTube channel. Why not? And that conversation was with Tim Renzetta. Timothy Renzetta is the co-founder of NGPF. He had a lot of success as an entrepreneur, but grew up, humble beginnings in New Jersey, but moved to California to pursue his business degree at Stanford. So ultimately had a lot of success as an entrepreneur. And, after our conversation, he reached out a couple of times via email. He was like, I just keep thinking about this conversation. Like, I feel like I can't just walk away after knowing you. You have like the perfect background, having had experience teaching in the school system, and now you're obsessed with personal finance. Like, you can merge those two things and work at this organization. Like, if you're interested, we can come up with a role that will allow you to do things that, you really want to do and support the mission. So we talked about it, and I joined the team. And at that time in 2018, there were only at the beginning of the year, 5 states that required personal finance as a full semester course for graduation in high school. And then by the end of 2018, 8 states. Now, actually some breaking news as of May 30th, which was the day my book launched.
Breaking news here.
May 30th, 2023, Connecticut became the 21st state to require a full semester of personal finance for high school graduation in the United States of America.
Oh, wow.
Breaking news.
That's now the last I heard was Michigan became the 14th state. So I did
That's
not know
right.
it's gone up to 21 now.
Oh, yes. And
That's
and the
great.
wild thing is Michigan was, right after Iowa and Georgia. So Florida happened in 2021, shortly after Iowa, then Georgia. In 2022, Michigan, then in late 2022, Kansas, 2023, New Hampshire, West Virginia, Indiana, Minnesota, and now Connecticut. So we have never seen this much growth this quickly in financial education in history. So it's a very opportune moment in time right now because there's a movement to fight for financial education access, and specifically in the high school public education system in the United States. But to your question, right, 21 states require it. What about all the rest? We got 50 states. That's
we're not right. We're not even halfway there. As tremendous of the progress that you've made.
Yes.
We're not even halfway there, right?
We're so close to getting halfway. So the narrative that's going around the country right now saying, no, that we don't teach financial literacy in school. Technically, that's not true. Almost half of the country does require it. So now the movement is, what about the other half? What about all those other students in the other states who aren't getting it? And don't they deserve it? And don't they need it too? So now it's about closing the gap and getting every student access. But it takes a lot of work. So to your question, why is it that it's not done? And why isn't this so easy? An open and closed door situation? It sounds so simple. Just add it. Well, it involves negotiating with so many key stakeholders. You've got to get the senators and the representatives at the state level involved, which means the Committee of Education on the House side and on the Senate side. So both sides of the aisle as well. Then you also have to get the education leadership involved, which could be the Board of Education, Agency of Education, the Department of Education at the state level. Then you also have to get the teachers union involved. You have to get the Principals Association involved, the superintendents involved. Sometimes the Bankers League wants to get involved and want to support. Sometimes credit union folks wants to get involved. Small business leaders want to get involved. So now you have all of these groups that are all interested in this happening. But as you know, when you have too many chefs in the kitchen, it's harder to even get anything done. So it can actually create logistical challenges to have so many people being involved. But they have to be involved, because if they're not, they wouldn't support, and they will feel like that's not, I'm not being involved in that. That's not fair. Why would I support something that I'm not even being asked to participate in? So it takes time to create this coalition at the local grassroots level in a state. And then once you have success with that, like we did in Michigan and Connecticut, Minnesota, you then have to go to every state by state by state, because education is not a federal issue in the United States. The president can't just wave a magic wand and say, from now on, every school has to teach it. That doesn't happen that way. Education is locally controlled. And so we have to pretty much have 50 states pass individual laws 50 times to get this one thing done.
And that's it sounds like a lot of politics involved. So one thing I've noticed is that I think maybe this might be everybody copies each other, right? So I'm in Georgia. I think you're in Florida, right? So I'm in Georgia, and Georgia, our governor, Brian Kemp, he does whatever Florida does. So Ron DeSantis, the governor. So
he signed the bill in
literally, like Florida did it, and then the next month, all of a sudden, Brian Kemp is announcing it that Georgia's going to do it. So Georgia, we copy everything you guys do in Florida. So I don't know if maybe that's helping, like other states. Hey, we don't want to be left out. Like, hey, these guys might be onto something here.
No, you have a great point. Imagine being the last state. Imagine being 2 or 3 states that are the only ones that don't teach personal finance. Ooh, that's embarrassing for your state, right? So you're right. There's this kind of like wildfire spreading now, because they don't want to be the last one holding the bag, the last one who's not teaching it. So I think that helps. The other thing is every state sort of adapts a little too, because Florida's legislation is really clear about the baseline things that need to be taught, like banking and budgeting and investing. But Georgia sort of tweaked things a bit and took the same baseline of topics, but added things like cryptocurrency, which I think Georgia's unique to that. It's the only state, to my knowledge, that actually names cryptocurrency and digital currencies as a topic that needs to be taught in high school education.
I didn't realize that. But to
Interesting, right?
me,
Yeah,
it's so, I first of all, I want to thank you for your tireless work on this.
of course.
This is a big deal. And to
Thank
me,
you.
teaching personal finance to, especially to kids in school,
Yeah.
it's the most basic life survival skill. And to
Yes.
me, we just went through a global pandemic. The
Right.
pandemic represented to me the greatest wake up call in our lifetime to get our
Mm,
finances in order. And
that's a
and
good
that's what
point.
I say that a zillion times until people don't want to hear me say it anymore. I'm like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm trying to, I'm doing my thing on a smaller level, but I really appreciate, all your efforts in that. And it's
Thank
so
you.
exciting to hear. Now we're at
Yeah.
21. See, I didn't know
That's
that.
right.
We've
That's
gone
right.
from 14 to 21
Yeah,
in a very short amount of time, it seems. So
it is.
that's very exciting.
Thank you.
So
I really appreciate that. I think it's important to find work that it's something you're passionate about and you can make money too, right? Because of course we all got to eat. But ultimately, that when you wake up in the morning, you feel compelled, like you feel this call to action that what you're doing is not just paying the bills, but is creating change and making impact. Now, everybody's not going to have that type of job. My dad worked at a restaurant and then drove a taxi cab. His job wasn't like he would wake up every day and go, I can't wait to take people to the airport today. I'm going to change their life. Like, no, but he didn't have the privilege to be able to find work that really what felt like he had a mission to do that work. He was an immigrant, only had certain types of jobs available to him. Now, for me to let that type of opportunity and privilege pass me by and not grab the bull by the horns, I mean, I feel like I have this calling, like I have to take advantage of the ability to be able to find work that pays well and allows me to do good at the same time. So, you say thank you to me, but honestly, for me, it's thank you to everybody who's allowed me to even pursue this type of career path that like literally brings me so much joy and allows me to feel and see the immediate impact of my efforts too.
that's awesome, man. It's so awesome to hear all that. And I thank you for sharing all the insight on that. So, as we wrap up today with author of the new book, Mind Your Money, Miss Yanely Espinal. Janelle, tell us, if people want to buy the book, where they can find it, if people want to connect with you, I know you have a great YouTube channel. What's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, so if you want to find me online, literally anywhere on social media, you can find me at Miss Be Helpful. So that's my like channel name on YouTube, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, anywhere where you're on social, just look up Miss Be Helpful, which is spelled MISSBE helpful. And then if you want to follow up about the book and buy the book or support the book, there's also a free downloadable guide that comes with the book. All of that stuff is on mindyourmoneybook.com.
Awesome. And we'll put links to all that in the description below, of course. So I just want, once again, thank you so much to my special guest, Miss
Thank
Yanely
you.
Espinal. And I
Thank
wish you all the best with this new book. Um, and check it out, everybody. I've read the book cover to cover. It's very good.
you.
It's
Yay.
very unique. People from all ages will learn something from this book,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
I encourage anybody to check it out. And remember, before we leave, this is Jason Brown wanting to remind you of my very favorite saying: "It's not the amount of money you make,
Mm,
but the margin that matters the most."
that's right.
We'll see you next time.